Good evening. So I'll admit I have once dressed up as a bus for Halloween. And I also dressed up as a subway conductor one year. And yes, when I interviewed at Commonwealth, I brought hand-drawn maps of the New York bus system. In my defense, they must have been pretty good maps because I'm standing here talking to you all today. Still, I think it's fair to say that I've been primarily interested in one thing for my entire life. I'd say my interest really developed in New York, where I lived the majority of my life before Commonwealth. As a child, I loved navigating the city with my parents or friends, visiting neighborhoods that were off the beaten track, like Canarsie. I fell in love with the efficiency and pace of the city, and as well as the easy accessibility of everything I wanted to see or do. Along with this love came a love for the subway. I rode it all the time, and even once I hid underneath the seat of the 3 train with a friend, and then covertly changed the subway destination sign to confuse tourists. True story. I'd say by 8th grade, I knew who I was. I was an independent city person, an 8th grader's idea of what it meant to be a New Yorker. By age 8, I had committed the entire subway system to memory, and by age 10, I was riding the bus alone. My middle school, the lab school, or the School for Collaborative Studies, may sound like a place where happy students sit around tables, complimenting each other's academic abilities, laughing, but it was not like that at all. Despite the name, my work was mine alone, and the teacher assigned it, and then I did it, and that was it. It was like New York, basically sink or swim. My study habits, though they might have been pretty unhealthy, were just to me an extension of being a self-sufficient, independent New Yorker. But as my middle school career came to an end, that identity would be challenged. I had 2 choices for a high school. One was Brooklyn Tech, which was 4 stops away on the R train, and in some ways it was a safe choice. I would stay in New York and maintain my identity as the train-obsessed kid, but it was huge. It was the largest public high school east of the Mississippi River, and I was not used to, and although I was used to the New York crowds, I just couldn't imagine making friends with 6,000 classmates. And by contrast, my other choice was Commonwealth, all the way in Boston. I could not imagine moving to Boston. It was the land of no Mexican food. The transport system was a transit museum. And the baseball team was morally insupportable. So it seemed like moving to a faraway country, even though I had already memorized all the stops on the T. It could not have been a more stressful choice for 13-year-old me. And I would tell you which I chose, but I do not want to spoil the surprise. I'd say the transition to Commonwealth was difficult. At Commonwealth, teachers actually have offices and you can go inside them. You're supposed to talk to them, and I wasn't used to that. I was afraid to use all the resources that were available to me, and the school day rituals of Commonwealth just felt strange and unfamiliar, and asking for help still felt like a self-betrayal or a cop-out for not trying hard enough. It was like a New Yorker asking for directions to Times Square. But as time went on, I felt my sense of self slipping, and my work constantly worried me. And as the work piled up, I stopped taking 4 buses to get home for fun, and as pass-fail disappeared, I even found less time to make maps. But with my parents' guidance, I became more comfortable asking for help on tougher assignments from teachers, or sending the occasional, "I need an extension" email. But I tried to hold on to my love of subways as much as possible, and I interned at the MBTA my freshman year. I remember staring at the massive board in the control room with the positions of each train on it and realizing that I'd made it in life. But I'd say that my interests were changing too. Once in middle school, my lovely dad told me, "You can't draw maps forever." And I initially resented it, but I hated to admit it to myself that he was right. Cartography just isn't as burgeoning as it once was in the 1400s. Commonwealth taught me to actively combine my original interests with what I had learned in my classes. And I've been able to apply the programming skills that I've learned in computer science to program sensors to collect garbage truck data in Cambridge. And I've also applied the skillful wordsmithery that I practiced in English class to a very, very exquisite memo for the Department of Transportation. I've moved away to a degree from my previous love of everything that has to do with New York subways, or even New York in general, and more towards data collection and infrastructure in cities. But looking back on my 4 years here, it strikes me that I actually haven't lost my old self. It's just transformed. Commonwealth changed me profoundly in a positive way. It might not sound that inspiring. I mean, an 8th grader interested in trains transforms over 4 years to a high school senior interested in infrastructure more generally. But I'd say that is the beauty of Commonwealth. Each of us transforms in our own way, sharpening our own skills and refining our interests and learning to be part of a community, but always, always retaining what made us unique in the first place. It's true that I'm no longer the completely train-obsessed and fully independent New Yorker I once was, but as I head off to college in August, I know that pieces of that person are still in me, and I might even pack my bus costume.